As someone was telling me earlier today, just how much they have enjoyed and appreciated this speaker series, but I mean, the technology was there, but what was essential was getting some great speakers. And we really have had that, and we're going to have another one tonight. So yeah, it's really worked out well. And someone had suggested that I open this up to the presbytery. And I would have done that, but it was our first venture of this sort. And I just thought it would be more manageable to keep it to our own congregation and friends of. In terms of the last half of the evening, that is to be discussion oriented, as you well know, you get too big of a group and nobody can really engage, and people feel a little more reluctant to engage as the group grows. So this is our last one tonight, and many of you have been here for some or all of them. And I'm just waiting for a couple more people who indicated to me that they were going to be joining us tonight. Is Brian coming tonight, Muriel?
Your microphone.
He is. Brian, are you checking in there? He will be right here. We'll just keep one speaker on, and that should work so that there's no echoing. If there is, just let us know.
Okay, here comes Susan, and Sheila's there. Many of you were part of our Savor the Summer program, where we brought in live music and food trucks and tried to have games for the kids and activities. That came to me courtesy of Jeff, who is in Hamilton, apparently is the center of the food truck movement. And so I heard about that through Jeff, who had a very successful one. Is that at the church where you currently are? Was that Bethesda?
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And so that probably didn't go this summer.
No, it did not. We could have at the end of the summer or early fall, but they just the organizers decided to just wait till see what happens come spring and reboot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll give it, we're 7:01. We'll just give it another, oh, there's Mr. Logan from Indian Lake. Hi, Bob. Good to have you with us.
Your microphone's off, Bob.
It's on now. There we go.
Welcome, Bob.
Hey, Muriel, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good.
Fancy.
You down in the tropics? I like your background.
Yes. I'm pretending to be at the cottage in the summertime, but I'm not.
The grass grows that
Wishful
tall at your
thinking.
cottage, eh?
Yeah, you've got some really nice grass also behind you, Denise. What's that picture?
That's our backyard in the spring.
Oh, it's actually that you've taken.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very nice. I didn't know you could put your own background in. I'll have to experiment some more.
Oh yeah. You can actually put your own videos in too. The ones that are moving, you can put a video in background if you've got something that's worth it.
Right.
Can you hear us now?
Yes,
Can now, Joy.
Okay, we've been talking since, but we
Oh,
we didn't know we were muted.
Well, we weren't ignoring you. We just couldn't hear you.
Oh,
Denny, I don't know if you have a list of registrants for tonight.
not specifically the ones that the newcomers I was warned about. That's Bob Logan and Ross and Susan. So they've chimed in. The others are pretty much the regulars.
Well, I think we're all here now and good to go. So
Yeah,
a warm welcome to everyone. I'm glad to have you with us. This is our last evening in this speaker series. And as I said earlier, I'm so appreciative of my friends who agreed to be part of the speaker series. We opened with Reverend Mark Gaskin, who spoke to us from his house in Brantford. And then David Sherbino from his home in Paris. And then the following week, his son Joel, also from Paris. And then Blair Bertrand from all the way from Barrhaven. And tonight, my very good friend, Jeff Chalmers, who is speaking to us from his home in Dundas. And so I really want to welcome, I'm glad that everyone who is here is here. We're going to hear from Jeff in regard to prison chaplaincy, and that is certainly something that I know very little about, and just saying the words, I think certain images come to our mind, and those images may be reflective and accurate, or they may be anything but. So as I say, it's certainly an area of ministry that is so foreign to me. So I really look forward to Jeff sharing with us tonight. So Jeff, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay,
Yeah.
Sean. Well,
just
thank-
before you get started, Jeff, can I ask people to turn off their microphones and turn off their videos, just so there's no interference and Jeff can have the floor to himself? Thank you.
Thanks, Denis.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, so first off, I need to say that in my church in Ancaster, Bethesda, we've opted to go the YouTube route, not the Zoom route. And maybe surprisingly, this is in fact only my second Zoom experience. And so you might be familiar with that old nugget of a quote from Canadian icon Marshall McLuhan, who famously said, "The medium is message." And what he meant by that is how something is presented, especially in terms of medium, affects what the message is, how it's given, and how it's received. So right off, I'm feeling the impact of this particular Zoom technology in terms of an intimacy of connection with people that I don't know, because the camera does that. The fact that many of you are in your homes does that. And one of the terms that we hear a lot in this pandemic times is bubble. And my own personal bubble, as Sean may, he definitely knows, but may have shared, is I'm kind of reserved, except under certain circumstances, but Sean can tell you more about that. But I'm feeling a closeness with all of you because of the technology and because of the invitation. So I'm taking that all to be a good thing. And I hope my lack of acquaintance with Zoom isn't overly negatively affected in our sharing time together. So I thank my very good friend Sean for inviting me to be part of this series. I know Sean to be an innovative and risk-taking person, and an evening series like this no doubt fits within that. So I thank you, Sean, for inviting me and for putting me on hold when circumstances really required me to do that. I'm glad that this is part of the Trinity Church Speakers Series, and not just for all of you being here, but in part because of the name, and that'll come out as we go through our time together. So I'm here in Dundas. not at the detention center. And I would ask Denis to pull up the worship center picture, which he so wonderfully figured out how to make it part and parcel of our time tonight. So I'm putting putting myself in Denis' hand with what you're seeing or not seeing. Here we are in the worship center in the Hamilton Wentworth Detention Center. And so that's going to be the filter for what I'm going to share about chaplaincy. And it's also going to be the filter. I asked Sean if I should include a bit of biography. And so this picture will serve as a filter for some of that. And hopefully it'll all weave together in both a informative and sensible and perhaps maybe even in an inspiring way. I picked up on Sean saying when it comes to chaplaincy and prison ministry, that we all probably have images of what it is or isn't. And I suspect, I'm not certain, but I suspect that some of those images may be confirmed and some may be altered significantly. So I'm not coming to you from the detention center. That would have been ideal, but my particular location for this unique ministry is Hamilton Wentworth Detention Center. And it is a maximum security institution. Security takes paramount over pretty much all other concerns. And one of the instances of that is I needed, in fact, to get special permission from the security manager to even share this image of our worship center as part of the evening tonight. So I couldn't come to you live from the detention center, but this will have to be the second best. In terms of the phrase, a picture being worth 1,000 words, it's not only worth 1,000 words, it's worth the being given the green light by our security manager. The title which I gave to Sean to use for our time together is Prison Break. And some of you may have seen episodes of that television show. I only saw a couple because it was too much like work being found at home. But I chose that title because of thinking that it's not a prison, it's a detention center. So there'll be opportunity to give those particulars a bit, but also a break in terms of that television show has had as its plot center point breaking out of prison and the getting out of a correctional facility, going back to the community is very much an integral part what chaplaincy is about, and needs to be so, and hopefully is so for the people who find themselves incarcerated. But the other reasoning for using the title Prison Break was that the break tonight is our gathering. So a bit of a break on your evening, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to come to this break time. So I'm not sure how Denise working that picture versus me, but probably more of me and less of the picture right now might be okay. And we'll have this figured out as we go.
Jeff,
oh.
Jeff, can you not see the picture on your screen?
I can see the picture, but I can't see me.
Ah, okay.
Maybe I'm not supposed to see me. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. It could probably the way in which your setup is configured.
Okay. Well, it's all right. You know what, Denise? No worries. We'll have that. We've got that out of the way at the start. So I'll just carry on. And if something changes and I come back into view, that's fine.
Okay, well, if I unshare, your picture will come back on your screen, but everybody else, I believe, is able to see your picture next to your speaking picture,
right
next to the picture.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right. So in terms of chaplaincy, then the filter is both this picture and our God, who is Trinity. So we're kind of setting the bar high, but to me, Trinity as the God who calls us into being, the God who calls us into restoration, as the God who calls us into ongoing growth, is the God who exists in relationship. That's the essence of who our God is, as Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer. That God's very being is about relationship. So anything that we can do, anything that we can imagine, anything that we can enact in ministry or in life that mirrors that relationship of love and creativity. In fact, this may sound rather high blown, but I think it's absolutely true. Mirrors the very being of God, and who we come to be in life and in relationships, both individually and as political entities, as the events to the south of us in the last little while have shown, or who we come to be in terms of how we deal with people who find themselves incarcerated. In all of that, that's affected by, I believe, by our relationships. And so, as a bit of a biographical note to underline that importance of relationship as we go through our time together, I'm going to ask Denis to pick up, to pull up the second picture that I sent off, and that Denis that Sean so kindly forwarded, and Denis has turned into. There we go. So this is a very significant group and people to my life and my relationships. You might recognize a somewhat younger and different looking Sean to the left of me, I guess it is. And all of these gentlemen, all of these folks started Knox College together. Sean may have shared, I'm not sure, pastorally, the two men on the left, Chris and Tom Vise. Chris passed away some years ago from ALS, and very, very sadly, difficultly, and unexpectedly, Tom, his brother right next to him, passed away only recently. But I share this picture to underline that for myself, who I have come to be, who I have grown to be, is not only a reflection of the presence of God in my life, but circles of friends, which happens to be the title that our little group has. But we all have those. We all have people that we relate to most closely. And again, perhaps one of the pluses of this pandemic time is that we'd be more aware of that, those circles, those bubbles, perhaps more thankful for them, perhaps more cognizant of them, perhaps more nurturing of them. But shifting the focus to chaplaincy, but holding in your hands that importance of relationship, because those who find themselves incarcerated, their relationships have been either barely existent or dysfunctional or broken, perhaps all of the above. And that's part and part of the reason why they find themselves incarcerated, part and parcel of the reasons why they have made choices to find themselves incarcerated. So moving on to our first filter, and that is God as creator. So my own biography is that I was not brought up in a church-going family, but for some reason, in fact, I identify that reason as my being created as a child of God, as we all are. I sense a keen sense of there being that divine reality, that divine presence, that presence of God beyond the circumstances of my life at the time, that there is a creator. There is reality beyond what we can see and touch and feel. And that reality is in fact the key reality that makes us human, that helps to shape our actions. So Hamilton Wentworth Detention Center, it holds a maximum of 500 people, used to be men and women. It's currently only men. The women got shipped out in order to try to provide for a little bit more distancing. But within that group of give or take 500 people, there is to a person, I don't hesitate to say, broken relationships with God as creator, broken relationships within themselves, body, mind, and spirit, psychologically, broken relationships, family relationships, and quite a number carried the broken relationships of a more communal nature. And that's seen most specifically within our Indigenous folks. But in that 500 people that are experiencing the reality of broken relationships and the destructive choices that can come from that, that's sort of the bad news. The good news is that within those 500 people, at least 85% connect with chaplaincy in one form or another. And it was interesting. I was called upon to give a little chaplaincy talk at the Correctional College, which happens to be in Hamilton. And when asked by church groups over the years, and I've been in chaplaincy almost 18 years now. Prior to that, in parish ministry in Presbyterian Church, and now in the United Church. But in speaking to churches or other community groups, people often want to know what is the length of time that we have any one individual. And I've always answered that by saying, well, 40 days. Being a detention center, it literally means that people are detained while awaiting trial, and over 90% of people that are in Hamilton Wentworth have not yet been sentenced, or if they have been, it's 1 day less than 2 years. So most of the people there have not been sentenced, and the length of stay can vary depending on the nature of their cases. So it can range literally from a few days, or at the other end of the spectrum, 6 or 7 years, depending on the charges that they have to deal with. So kind of just taking an average of that, I've said 40 days. Not very scientific, or so I thought, but very helpful from a theological point of view. As we all know, 40 days is one of those biblical jump-off numbers, or 40 is at least 40 days of Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, preparing for ministry. Israel, 40 years in the wilderness. This number 40 continually appearing as a time, a difficult time, a desert time, a time of trial, but also a time of honing and yearning, and a time where God is inviting to come through that time to the other side. So you can well imagine that choosing that number of 40 has been very helpful, not only in sharing with churches, but in speaking with inmates themselves, and suggesting that they see their time as parallel to those biblical times of 40 years of days of trial and preparation. However, when I was called upon to speak at the training college, just before I came up to speak, the person who was the head of the college, corrections does have a sort of a pseudo military structure to it, and I believe this person was a captain. I don't remember her name, but the captain was speaking to the cadets, and she went on to say just before I was on that statistically, the average stay at a detention center is, you might be expecting the word I'm going to say, 40 days. So great statistical confirmation of a theological and pastoral point. So within those 40 days, there is a great divergency, but for those people experiencing those 40 days, many huge high percentage, 85%, as I said, reach out to connect with chaplaincy in one form or another. So going back to the worship center slide now, it's important to lay out that although I am a Christian minister and I'm speaking to all of you tonight through, as I said, the filter of the Trinity, spirituality or spiritual care is within the province of Ontario recognized as fundamental human right. Not all of the correctional officers see it that way, most do. But to me, that's a very good and important thing, because it speaks to that within the province of Ontario, the very definition of what it means to be human is that we have a creator and we have spirituality and we have that connection to God. And so people who are incarcerated, they could be from many different faiths, some more than one at a time. But you see here in the worship center a couple of things I'd like to point out underlying this basic foundation of a spiritual reality that I work to have people nurture and connect with. You can't quite see the poster in front of the drums there, but it's barcodes that you might see in a scanner when you're purchasing an item. But written underneath it, it says, "To God, you are not a number." And there's a lot of depersonalization that happens when people are incarcerated. So in working against that in the worship center, there is the declaration that not only those who gather, those in the entire institution belong to God, are part of God's love and God's kingdom, to use Christian terminology, and they are people first and foremost. Sons, oh, nice work, Denny. Denny, sons and daughters of God. And no matter how their own self-worth or how the harsh reality of a detention center, and it certainly is very harsh, nevertheless, their personhood remains, and that's their personhood as a connecting person to God is part and parcel of what chaplaincy is about. Also in the room, in the worship center, you can see this is kind of the altar on the back wall. You can see an Islamic prayer rug, and also a dream catcher, and beside it, you can see the golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and that is expressed in this poster in pretty much all the world faiths. But what the common use of that golden rule often leaves out is that it is based on, yes, respect and love for others and care for others as unto ourselves, because God has created us all. So I'm spending a fair bit of time in this first filter of God the Creator, because it's so very important, both in terms of how I try to function as a chaplain and the reality of those who come in, who find themselves incarcerated. In the worship center, there are programs that happen on a daily basis, dependent upon escorts. The escorts kind of sit outside of the main worship area, but are there for security purposes. And you can see predominantly, or somewhat predominantly, the drum there, and the drum is part of the smudging circle for indigenous people, and that certainly is one of the populations that we relate to. It is true that indigenous folks are disproportionately represented in both our facility and no doubt provincially and federally, and won't dwell on this too much, but it's a part of my reality that I've had the privilege of being able to take in far more deeply than I would have otherwise, indigenous spirituality, but also have come up against the reality that you hear being spoken of in terms of generational harm being done by things like colonization and residential schools. So there's the worship center, and I also was very glad to be able to share this picture with you, not only because it speaks of both that basic core spirituality of God the Creator, as well as a chaplaincy reality that I need to be able to affirm and speak to spiritual care for people of any faith who find themselves incarcerated, but also this worship center, as modest as it is in fact the most aesthetically beautiful room in the entire building, which doesn't say much for the rest of the building. As I say, it's pretty raw, but that's how it should be in terms of the worship center being that place of most beauty, of most peacefulness, of most potential restoration, as God is about things good, beautiful, and true. You'll notice too, as I continue kind of deconstructing the image here, hopefully with some facts and some spirit of chaplaincy, my attire is pretty casual. I began by wearing more traditional clergy clothes, and I have no objection to that. It had the advantage of people automatically knowing that that's a chaplain, but it had the disadvantage of throwing up a bit of a wall in conversations, taking them as a whole, and also too closely identifying as a Christian minister by wearing clergy attire. And so we're going to go on now to the, I hope you're able to perhaps have either brought some questions with you or are writing notes as we go. I'm really trying to bring together like a sort of a combination of my own journey a little bit and some facts and figures and the heartbeat of what chaplaincy is about. So the second person of the Trinity and our second filter is, of course, God incarnate in Christ, or God the Redeemer. My own journey into that faith, that specific Christian faith, happened while taking a high school religion course, and I was caught up by a visitation, I would call it, of Christ and an encounter with Jesus, not just as a prophet or a teacher, but as the second person of the Trinity, as our Savior, as the one who seeks to save and redeem, I would say, all of humanity and Earth itself. In terms of the detention center, a high percentage of the self-identification of our inmates are Christian of one sort or another. And that statistic is reflected in the worship center programming, where there are a lot of Christian services. You may remember the drums in the room. Myself and the other chaplain happen to be Christians and musicians, so we do offer a praise and faith and music time. But we're also very connected with the broader community. Some of the community groups that we are connected with, you may have heard of: Prison Fellowship, New Life Prison Ministries, Crossroads, and Gideon's come to mind. So we meet with folks who are incarcerated, in broken relationships, in the starting point that they're sons and daughters, they're children of God. We might meet with them simply because they know they're entitled to a special diet, they're entitled to a scripture from their own faith, but in many cases, those kind of practical and pulling things off the shelf, getting to them, are followed by conversations that lead into hearing about, in many cases, broken homes or addictions, or just self-admittedly destructive choices. And within those conversations, as well as the proclamation that happens in the worship center, comes the opportunity to share Christ as Redeemer, and the one who wishes to take a broken life and bring forgiveness and wholeness. You may or may not be surprised that many of the folks and many of the people that are incarcerated are very biblically literate. Not being a great chapter and verse person myself, I in fact have to be on my toes, because there is a lot of biblical literacy, at least in terms of knowledge, not necessarily in terms of discipleship or taking those things to heart. Another factor that I would like to bring in is that our ministry, whether it's myself, the other chaplains, or our community groups, is really seed planting because of the nature of detention center, nature of different ranges not being able to mix because of the charges making it a threat to other inmates or staff. And so it's not that often that I hear about, well, what has happened with all this chaplaincy ministry, all this connecting with God the Creator, all this connecting in those cases of God the Son and of Christ. Well, there's not many, but I'll share one with you. I have come across a few people that I see while being around and about in Hamilton, and most are not shy about acknowledging their connection with myself. They might say, "Hey, Padre, how's it going?" Or "Hey, Chaplain," or "How's it going?" And some few have taken the opportunity to jump in and say they've connected with a church, or most recently, they've reconnected with a mosque. They've connected in faith. But one kind of humorous story, and I need to share this, so it kind of is a capsule of the profile of the people that I work with, that many sincerely want to come to faith, but carry a certain cultural, let's say, cultural baggage and way of being. Anyways, so I saw this person on the street, and if you're familiar with popular culture at all, the figure of Kurt Cobain comes to mind, the late singer of Nirvana. He was kind of a spitting image, right down to the kind of ripped plaid and jeans. But this particular person, I did spend a fair bit of time with, and he deliberately had to cross the street to come and talk to me. And he came over and said, "Oh, Padre, Chaplain Jeff, how are you?" I said, I'm okay. How about you? What's up with you?" And he proceeded to talk about how he made these connections. But in describing those connections, he went and said, "Well, I'm doing bluppin' great, and I've connected with such and such a church. You can fill in the blanks for yourself." Kind of humorous, but kind of indicative of the reality that we work with as chaplains, in terms of kind of, I guess you could say, rough and ready people, but children of God, and many willing to entertain a reacquaintance with that faith and that life. And so we're going to move on now. I've gone past the 30 minutes of presentation time, but if you're tracking with this, and I hope most of you are, you'll know that we're 2/3 of the way through. And the spirit section is, in fact, by design, for my sharing, the shortest section. And that's ongoing impact, ongoing discipleship, ongoing seeing the effects, the good effects, the positive effects of God, who comes to us in Christ and gives us the Spirit to see the church renewed, to see life renewed. And I would say that one of the Spirit movements, whether it's for people who are incarcerated, or simply those who are at the fringes of our culture, our families, our communities, to all of those people, the Spirit is calling the church to seek them out, not just wait for them to come into our places of worship, but rather to seek them out in terms of how the Spirit is doing redemption within correctional facilities. I can only speak somewhat narrowly from my reality of both Hamilton, Wentworth, and Ontario. And currently, the Solicitor General Deputy Ministry, Deborah Richardson, is a person of faith, is Indigenous spirituality. But it's funny how a leader can affect the culture of not just an institution, but an entire ministry. Because it's very clear her concern for spirituality is being seen in the hiring of more chaplains, and we're about to receive one. In the possibility after COVID of an annual chaplaincy conference, but more importantly, the conversing with chaplains and the conversing with other levels of administration in a way that affirms from the very highest level what is written on the Human Rights Code. It is being spoken to by this person as the importance, the absolute core importance of spirituality and faith, in terms of not just custody, not just control, but community and life integration. So I think I'm going to wind down in terms of that being the presentation part. I know it's been a lot to cover, but I've tried to include a little bit of biography, some facts, but focusing on the heartbeat of chaplaincy ministry, which is bringing that connection between people and our creating God. So questions and hopefully some answers.